It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Exactly.
Okay, so what do we do?
So the other thing is horrifying. It is that you could actually spray sulfuric acid in the stratosphere 20 kilometers over our head and use that to stop the planet warming up in a kind of ugly tech fix.
You could spray something into the atmosphere to change. Okay,
spray pollution into the atmosphere to stop it warming.
So in the end, pollution saved them all. We owe pollution. We owe acid rain an apology, is what you're saying.
It would be a totally imperfect technical fix.
Okay.
It would have risks. It wouldn't get us out of the long-run need to stop polluting, but it might actually save people and be useful.
Okay, so how, again, I interrupted slightly there. How does it work? How many planes are we talking about here? How do you do this?
So let's say you wanted to stop it warming in 2020.
Yeah.
You start with a fleet of just 2 or 3 kind of modified business jets.
What kind of, like a G6?
Yeah, like a G650.
Like a G6.
That's
like
it.
A G6.
And you put, say, 20,000 tons of sulfuric acid into the stratosphere every year, and each year you have to put a little more, and this doesn't, in the long run, mean that you can forget about cutting emissions. We will need to rein in
No,
emissions.
we'll get to it eventually, yeah.
But it does.
But in the meantime, we're shrouding the earth in sulfuric acid.
So people are terrified about talking about this because they're scared that it will prevent us cutting emissions.
Right, and also that it's sulfuric acid.
It is.
You're bearing the lead. Is there any possible way this can come back to bite us in the ass? Blanketing the earth in sulfuric acid, because I'm all for it. This is the all-chocolate dinner. I still get to have my CO2, and I just need to spray sulfuric acid.
Right.
All over the earth.
Right question. But we put 50 million tons of sulfuric acid in the air now as pollution, and it kills 1 million people a year worldwide.
Okay, and that's
so
good or bad?
It's terrible.
But it'll be better if we put more in.
We're talking about 1% of that, a tiny fraction of that. So we should reduce that sulfuric acid.
So if it
pollution.
kills 1 million people and we're only
bad.
doing 1% more, we're just killing 10,000 more people.
You can do math.
Okay.
But that's, so killing people is not the objective here.
Killing people, not the objective. I just wanted to be clear. All right. Could an individual start this?
In practice, only in country.
Okay. What about a man in like a hollowed out volcano with henchmen who occasionally shakes his fist at the sky and says, "They said I was a fool at Harvard. Who's the fool now?"
It's the natural worry. I won't
shake your fist and say the fools.
It's the natural worry, but I think in the end, no. This would be done by major countries, but the problem is how countries agree about where to set the thermostat, who decides, and my biggest reason for writing the book and for talking about it is my view that we won't make good decisions in ignorance.
So we have to have the discussion now so that when it becomes our last hope, people can say, "Hey, we talked about this. Remember, we said we get to do it."
The worst way to make decisions about this would be if we all agree that we won't talk about it in polite society, we suppress it, which is basically what had been happening, and then in 2030, suddenly in a crisis, we make fast decisions.
Maybe it's happening already. You ever look at those planes up there? They have contrails behind them. Maybe all those planes with contrails, maybe they're actually spraying chemicals into the atmosphere right now, and Uncle Sam isn't telling us.
It seems extremely unlikely.
That the United States is not telling something to its citizens? That seems extremely likely to me. Read the newspaper. I think they might have your idea already. Dr. Mister, thank you so much. David Keith, A Case for Climate Engineering. We'll be right back.
The Iceman cometh.
This is a test. Biological nucleating agents freezes the water instantly in front of your face. Most don't know that exists, that technology exists. Think of the first aid kit you have that sits on a shelf for 20 years. You mix the chemicals together, you have ice. That's basically what this is. When you do that on an unimaginably massive scale, you get the scenarios we've just created. And that's important to understand. We have the anti-geoengineering community not acknowledging what is a major part of the equation, chemical ice nucleation for weather modification.
Instant ice packs. When you crack an instant ice pack, a small bag of water inside pops and mixes with the ammonium nitrate, causing an endothermic reaction, freezing solid. They don't need to be frozen ahead of time and can last up to 5 hours. How hot and cold packs
destroyed the fucking world.
Please, show some mercy.
Mercy? I'm afraid that the condition has left me cold to your pleas of mercy.
And his name is David Keith.
I think it's crucial to distinguish these two completely different kinds of things. Carbon removal is inherently expensive. We can disagree about exactly how much, but it's expensive.
Putting sulfates in the aerosol is potentially so cheap that costs are irrelevant, in the same sense as when you think about security strategy, that actual cost of nuclear warheads is not a big driver in security strategy. Costs are so cheap that the richest people on the planet could perhaps afford to buy an ice age, that individual small states could act alone. So I'm working with one of the leading contractors of high altitude aircraft in the U.S., Aurora Flight Sciences. We're in the middle of a contract they have with us looking at the cost of doing this, and the costs are, as we thought, small. These costs
You add it to the fuel, or would it?
No, that doesn't work at all. That's in the blogosphere. No, you build custom aircraft that would fly at about 75,000 feet. That would put the appropriate sulfur, whatever it is, in the atmosphere. And the costs of doing that really work out to be low enough that costs don't matter.
Solar geoengineering is the idea that you could, in principle, reduce the rate of climate change or reverse it by making the Earth more reflective, by reflecting away more sunlight, for example, by putting reflective particles, aerosol pollution, if you like, in the upper atmosphere, by putting reflective particles, aerosol pollution, if you like, in the upper atmosphere.
Improved science and engineering will, whether we like it or not, give us more and more leverage to affect the planet, to control the planet, to give us weather and climate control, not because we plan it, not because we want it, just because science delivers it to us bit by bit, with better knowledge of the way the system works and better engineering tools to affect it. Now, suppose that space aliens arrived on, maybe they're going to land at the UN headquarters down the road here, or maybe they'll pick a smarter spot. But suppose they arrive and they give you a box, and the box has two knobs. One knob is the knob for controlling global temperature, maybe another knob is a knob for controlling CO2 concentrations. You might imagine that we would fight wars over that box, because we have no way to agree about where to set the knobs. We have no global governance, and different people will have different places they want it set. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. It's not very likely. But we're building that box. The scientists and engineers of the world are building it piece by piece in their labs, even when they're doing it for other reasons, even when they're thinking they're just working on protecting the environment. They have no interest in crazy ideas like engineering the whole planet. They develop science that makes it easier and easier to do. And so I guess my view on this is not that I want to do it, I do not, but that we should move this out of the shadows and talk about it seriously, because sooner or later we'll be confronted with decisions about this, and it's better if we think hard about it, even if we want to think hard about reasons why we should never do it. I'll give you two different ways to think about this problem that are the beginning of my thinking about how to think about it. But what we need is not just a few oddballs like me thinking about this. We need a broader debate, a debate that involves musicians, scientists, philosophers, writers who get engaged with this question about climate engineering and think seriously about what its implications are. So here's one way to think about it, which is that we just do this instead of cutting emissions because it's cheaper. I guess the thing I haven't said about this is it is absurdly cheap. It's conceivable that, say, using the sulfates method or this method I've come up with, you could create an ice age at a cost of 0.001% of GDP. It's very cheap. We have a lot of leverage. It's not a good idea, but it's just important. I'll tell you how big the lever is. The lever is that big. And that calculation isn't much in dispute. You might argue about the sanity of it, but the leverage is real. So because of this, we could deal with the problem simply by stopping reducing emissions, and just as concentrations go up, we can increase the amount of geoengineering. I don't think anybody takes that seriously. Because under this scenario, we walk further and further away from the current climate. You have all sorts of other problems like ocean acidification that come from CO2 in the atmosphere. Anyway, nobody but maybe one or two very odd folks really suggest this. But
the same theme of the collective insanity, we're told that, quote, discovering a new way by which aerosols rapidly form and grow at high altitude. Listen to this carefully. This is a true harbinger of just how insane our society is, just how insane the so-called climate science community is. From this report, aerosol particles can form and grow in Earth's upper troposphere in an unexpected way. This is reports from the Cloud Collaboration. It's a paper published in the journal Nature. And they state the new mechanism may represent a major source of cloud and ice seed particles in areas of the upper troposphere, exactly where the jet traffic is, where ammonia is efficiently transported vertically. They don't say how. In fact, here's what they say. How new aerosol particles form in the atmosphere remains unknown. Exclamation point, that's their words. And it shows that these particles are highly efficient at seeding ice crystals, chemical ice nucleation for weather modification, being sprayed from jet aircraft that anyone but the clinically blind can see, with mountains of climate science data to back up what these processes are. Lab tests, hundreds of them. Geoengineeringwatch.org has hundreds by ourselves, proving that climate engineering elements are in these operations. Our groundbreaking film, The Dimming, again, you can view this for free at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org, proves what these aircraft are emitting, all on film, all on the record. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab with top scientists, flying to altitude, gathering samples from heavy aircraft, sampling those at one of the world's top labs, proving that they are spraying, and they're still pretending they have no idea where these aerosols are coming from. No idea. And this is, quote, science. Trust the experts, right? The experts that are paid by who? To say what?
to get a concrete picture of what it is we're talking about when we're talking about putting aerosols into the atmosphere. I did a radio interview and somebody's question to me was, is it going to smell? Is the sky going to look different? How will those things get there? And I thought, these are practical questions for the layperson.
There are many ways that it might be done, but if it was aerosols in the stratosphere, it would likely be put there by airplanes, a number of sort of 20 or 30 airplanes by mid-century operating from a few airfields. That's one way it could be done.
And they would go up every day and do this?
They'd be flying continuously, putting up aerosols. And the aerosols naturally spread evenly in the stratosphere. It's actually very hard, so you can't get them in one place to block weather. That's actually impossible if you wanted to. So the stratosphere things spread pretty evenly, and so you'd be bringing aerosols up there and they'd be spreading over the stratosphere.
And what's the chemical being discussed?
So the best understood chemical is sulfates or sulfuric acid. So it's the same thing that is naturally in the stratosphere, both from volcanoes and natural emissions, but there's a bunch of other ideas.
I must confess, you have an astonishingly good idea there, Doctor.
Thank you, sir. Right down to Dr. Strangelove Saves the Earth from The Economist. And that got me thinking. I've worked on this topic on and off, but not so much technically. And I was actually lying in bed thinking one night, and I thought about this child's toy, which is hence the title of my talk. And I wondered if you could use the same physics that makes that thing spin around in the child's radiometer to levitate particles into the upper atmosphere and make them stay there. One of the problems with sulfates is they fall out quickly. The other problem is they're right in the ozone layer, and I prefer them above the ozone layer. And it turns out, I woke up the next morning and I started to calculate this, and it was very hard to calculate from first principles. I was stumped. But then I found out that there were all sorts of papers already published that address this topic because it happens already in the natural atmosphere. So it seems there already find particles that are levitated up to what we call the mesosphere, about 100 kilometers up, that already have this effect. I'll tell you very quickly how the effect works. There are a lot of fun complexities I'd love to spend the whole evening on, but I won't. But let's say you have sunlight hitting some particle and it's unevenly heated. So the side facing the sun is warmer, the side away cooler. Gas molecules that bounce off the warm side bounce away with some extra velocity because it's warm, and so you see a net force away from the sun. That's called the photophoretic force. There are a bunch of other versions of it that I and some collaborators have thought about how to exploit, and of course we may be wrong. This hasn't all been peer-reviewed. We're in the middle of thinking about it, but so far it seems good. But it looks like we could achieve long atmospheric lifetimes, much longer than before, because they're levitated. We could move things out of the stratosphere into the mesosphere, in principle solving the ozone problem. I'm sure there will be other problems that arise. And finally, we could make the particles migrate over the poles, so we could arrange the climate engineering so it really focused on the poles, which would have minimal bad impacts in the middle of the planet where we live, and do the maximum job of what we might need to do, which is cooling the poles in case of planetary emergency, if you like. So this is a new idea that's crept up that may be essentially a clever idea than putting sulfates in. Whether this idea is right or some other idea is right, I think it's almost certain that we will eventually think of cleverer things to do than just putting sulfur in. That if engineers and scientists really turn their minds to this, it's amazing how it can affect the planet. The one thing about this is it gives us extraordinary leverage. Improved science and engineering will, whether we like it or not, give us more and more leverage to affect the planet, to control the planet, to give us weather and climate control.
This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine, by design, is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible.
What the hell did you just say?
Turning on and off. That is the end of the argument.
That's HARP. Most here have heard of HARP, I would assume. Now, for those that haven't, HARP is only one installation of perhaps 100 that are on that scale around the globe. There are many other forms of radio frequency transmission I'll get into in a moment. But HARP is an ionosphere heater, a massively powerful radio frequency microwave transmitter that causes an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere and can heat the ionosphere up to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Why would they want this? And this is stated military data. I'm not hypothesizing. This is not conjecture. As you heat the ionosphere, you cause it to expand up and down. And what that means is with this directional transmitter, which means they can bounce it off the atmosphere to different locations around the planet, you can create high-pressure domes. Why would they want to create a high-pressure dome? Because in the northern hemisphere, that creates a clockwise spin, just like the pulley. Picture a fan belt on a car. You've all seen that. The belt winds counterclockwise around one, clockwise around another. Most have seen that. That allows them to steer the upper level winds into nearly any configuration they wish. So the areas that are under that high-pressure dome fry. They fry. And that's exactly what has happened. Keep this in mind. That's another shot of HARP. There are many of these around the globe. Different designs of facilities, they do the same thing. Remember we went over the heating of the ionosphere, the upward and downward pressure that makes high-pressure dome. Much like the ridiculously resilient ridge. That's what the meteorologists have termed the ridiculously resilient high-pressure area that is parked over the U.S. West, that has cut off our precipitation for so many years. And that's what it looks like. We have the jet stream. Remember I described the fan belt around a car engine block, and that's what it looks like. So you have a low pressure zone there that spins counterclockwise. Then a high pressure zone that spins clockwise. The majority of the US population is in the eastern half of the country. If the climate engineers can keep the eastern half of the country cooled down, then the majority of the US population is confused and divided as to the true state of the climate, because how can it be warming if it's cool there all the time, or a lot of the time? And so we become at minimum climate sacrifice zone. That's taken from this summer. Fires everywhere, massive high pressure zones, so the moisture goes down into the lower Eastern Pacific, up. It goes up around that high pressure zone. It's chemically isolated, I'll cover that in a moment, and all that moisture is dropped further east. We all know how much moisture they've been getting, don't we? Now see, when a storm's coming, often the rain comes late, comes less. We have days of featureless skies, dry as a bone. That's because there's a canopy of aerosols that don't allow convection, and it migrates that moisture right across us to wherever they want it to be.
For example, in the western U.S. are much more susceptible to this because we've been kept under an ionosphere-created high-pressure dome, which spins the upper-level wind currents clockwise, which appears to be being utilized by the climate engineers to spin the moisture around the western U.S. while it's being chemically nucleated. This is a form of cloud seeding, patented processes of chemical ice nucleation for weather modification, which cools down the cloud moisture, creates a colder, denser layer of air in the ground, and as they continue to cool this air mass as it rotates around the western U.S. high-pressure dome and into the eastern U.S., they're able to keep the eastern half of the continental 48 states cooler. And in fact, over the last now 9 years, the most anomalously less warm region on the entire planet is the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48. That doesn't mean there hasn't been record warm temperatures there in between these cool downs.
This is extremely telling. October 14th, less than a week ago. Take a look at that round bubble. Is that not telling? That's a high pressure dome parked right over the top of us that ensures nothing can float in it. You would never see this meteorologically 20 years ago, never. And we have a meteorological community that absolutely knows this is going on. They know it, and they will not say so until we peacefully pressure them enough to close them out of the shadows. And if we can do that, the second we do, there'll be an army of people coming from academia if we give them enough public cover. But that is extremely damning. Circular, high-pressure dome from an ionosphere heater.
Funny. She doesn't look Jewish.
The hell is wrong with you?
Merci.